Oh, boy.
I allowed other things to take my precious mental space.
I thought you were going to say that like put it in the trick, like if it's something.
No,
Something
I want to get like ice for iced tea or something like that. The glass.
Antoinette, I have 6:30. I'm going to start the webinar. You don't have to start the meeting, but hopefully we'll start to see some attendees join.
My glasses were bothering me as a group, you know. And then he got foggy or something. I take them off, I put them down. Get my eyes to be primary. It's important.
How you doing? Yeah.
One point I want that one, and it was like, and that was like, okay. I cannot let anything or anyone, control me that way. Really. In my 30s, I have no excuse. I have an excuse for the whole, you know.
Is the AC working in the building?
Nope.
I really feel this. Oh my God, I left my punch on. Because I know the NYPD told the council person's office that it was fixed.
Yeah, they fix it every couple of days and it breaks every couple of days. 90-year-old building. The whole system needs to be torn out and replaced, but there's no budget for that. Okay.
Sorry? Yeah, pretty much sorry. So we're gonna get started. I just want to make sure. So right now we only have Johnson on the line. John, can you hear us? Okay, I know there were a lot of audio issues during the last meeting.
They'll have to respond once I call attendance. Let's see. No, that's fine. And you're not talking into the microphone anyhow. Bring it close. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call attendance, and when I call your name, please acknowledge your name. If you are joining us via Zoom and you're a committee member, your attendance will count, but you won't count towards quota. When I call your name, please unmute yourself, acknowledge your name, and then mute yourself again. And then I'm going to pass the attendance sheet around. I don't think we have any guests here tonight, but if there are any, they could sign in. So let's start with Antoinette Martinez. Thank you. Alberto Ortiz Almeida. Joan Body. Gladys Bruno. John Fontillas. Leonette Lopez. Thank you. John Johnston.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marilyn Melman. Maria Roca. Thank you. John Centaur.
Present.
Thank you. Elise Shook. Thank you. If you are a board member but not a committee member, I'm going to write your name down, but I'm not going to call you because your attendance does not count. But we know you're here. Attendance has been called. You have quorum. Nobody leave.
Please don't leave.
So, for tonight's meeting, we have two folks that are on the line with us, John Johnson, who's a committee member, and also Elise, Golden. Elise, you're from Nicely or the New Economy Project? I apologize, I always get the mixed up.
Hi, I work with New Economy Project. That's my employer, and then we coordinate Nicely, the Coalition of Community Land Trusts. So I can be representing both.
Okay, thank you so much. So Alicia actually reached out to Golden, who's going to help us tonight in brainstorming on how we can work on these community land trust planning sessions that we've been discussing. We have a lot of experience within this topic, and will help us to really get focused on how we can really get the community engaged and with other translation services. So we're going to get to these in about like 5 minutes. Just want to orient everyone to the meeting. And because we have quorum, we have two resolutions that were proposed last month. So once it passed this up for a really quick vote, can this be, what would be an efficient way to do this? Roll call or do we do?
I think you could, it's a small group. I think you could do raised hands.
Okay, so we'll do it that way. So I know it's really all up there. Okay. So the first resolution was that the committee should send a letter to the mayor's office, opposing Mayor Eric Adams' attempt to suspend the city's right to shelter law. So we'll do that by raising our hands.
I'll call John Johnston as well.
Are we
John,
taking,
you would-
are we taking a vote?
Yeah, on the first item,
About the letter? Didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
the right to shelter law, opposing.
Can I just vote present?
Yes, you can.
Okay, present.
I wasn't counting. Sure looks like it. Everybody in the room voted for it with one present. So.
Okay. And then the second resolution that was proposed by a community member is that, I'm just gonna read out how they accepted it. Pass a resolution for number 714, this bill would establish a land bank for New York City, which would be tasked with acquiring, warehousing, and transferring real property to develop, rehabilitate, and preserve affordable housing. And this letter, we should talk about how it could help benefit our community the most, since we have a lot of properties in the area for potential housing. In addition to this, another resolution idea is for the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, which allows tenants to have first dibs to buy the apartment building, which allows them to preserve affordable housing. I have a question, and I apologize if this discussion will take place. I'm not aware of it. The language we're using. Can you speak into the microphone? Sure. Well, I have a question to clarify that the word acquiring, warehousing, and transferring real property to develop. What do the two words real property mean in this, context?
Do you have any,
Okay, so is it real property contrary to public asset? Or is it real real, what is, that means that you cannot transfer, I don't know, airplanes? What does real property mean? Is it mean private property or property that has been, is, part of an estate, interstate property that is part of that,
today, I think we passed one,
So
resolution.
there's, I think an answer to that in the chat.
To clarify that it's another word for real estate property.
in private hands, not in public. In the law, there's a difference. This building, for example, is a public asset. It's a property, but it's a public asset. It's owned by all of us.
I'm gonna use this on the phone tonight to help, with brainstorming for the workshop. So if we have, and if you wanna hold off and revisit the language, what I can do is send it everyone, and then we can dissect it a little bit more, and then we can revisit that verbal.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
I didn't see your words on the TV.
Can you all hear me?
You just have to hold it.
You gotta get close to it.
Okay, what we're going to do is revisit the language for this resolution. So for tonight, we only were able to pass the first one, which is to send a letter to the mayor's office, opposing, his attempt to suspend the city's right to shelter law. I'm going to follow up with everyone, and thank you, Elise, for clarifying, the definition of real property. I'll send this out to everyone within the housing committee, so that we can dissect the language a bit more, and come up with something everyone is comfortable with before we come up for a vote. So really quickly, I know a lot of folks that are on the committee have been really interested, in learning more about different developments that are going up in Sunset Park, and it's causing a lot of anxiety, not knowing exactly, what's going on behind the scenes. So if there are any developments that you have questions about, send them over, to Jeremy, will forward it over to me, and we'll work with the councilwoman's office to see if they have more information, or if they can work to help get us more information about those properties. I know that there were questions about Plain Rockville and some other developments, so if you have anything and particular addresses, we can work on doing a deeper dive on those.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. You mind? Is something happening with St. Marcos? That's my first question.
Right, I know that was a property that was mentioned, particularly before by committee members, so that's why I'm mentioning it, but definitely, we'll work with the councilwoman's office to find out what's going on with different properties.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, I recently learned and shared with the board that there is an MTA project going on. Damon, you had mentioned this, 38th Street between 3rd and 4th, where that construction is. That's actually an MTA property or MTA control property. There is a construction project going on to do a project related to the subway system. But it is a publicly controlled piece of land. And I don't believe the board had any previous notice about that. And so I think I can send that to you incident, but I would like to know if the elected officials were given any notice about that.
We can definitely follow up on that, and I can follow up with John Johnston to see if, the transportation committee has any information on that, and perhaps we could just collaborate a little bit more on that development. So, yeah,
Going back for a second to some local. I called the Brooklyn diocese about that. I called them once a month just to see, and months of work every time. A lot of things that I thought. I said, I'm just a regular citizen of the community. It's a property that is still there. And okay, is that better? And so there was no hint of anything one way or the other. Oh, from them officially, so whatever that means.
Okay, thank you for that update. I thank you for being consistent. So with further ado, at our last meeting was super productive. Our last two meetings were productive. So we came together and really thought of the idea of having a summer series that really is turning into a fall series because we're short on time. But we're using the summer to sort of get together and to plan. So really appreciate you and you being on the call tonight to help us brainstorm. So the idea is to have a series of meetings focused on community land trust. And we broke them up into three. So the first that will kick off is being led by Elise on the housing committee. Thank you. And she worked to have Elise Golden on the call tonight. So we'll kick off the series with this introductory meeting. And then the next two series would be financing of CLTs, which is going to be led by Damien, and then the legal challenges related to CLT. So, and I'll be led by Jonathan Story. So I know you both have reached out to Western Clean CLT and they're confirming they can get back to us. So thank you for that. For tonight's meeting, we're going to focus on this first workshop, since we have Elise on the call, and then next time later we'll start doing some ideas for this. So Elise, kick it over to you.
Sure. Just transparency. I'm having a little trouble hearing everything that you all are saying. But what I heard and understand is like you're kicking it to me to brainstorm some ideas with you all about the first session around public outreach. Is that right?
Yes, can you hear me, Elise?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for being here, joining the meeting. Really appreciate it. So yes, I think what we are thinking about for the first session is to have like a brief introduction to CLTs overall, but then do a broader kind of description of real practical engagement strategies with the community. So nuts and bolts. So that was my idea for the first session. So I would love to hear directly, have a conversation tonight to get a sense from you, Elise, as to like hands-on community engagement approaches that we should pursue. What has worked well, lessons learned. I know that there are only a couple of CLTs in New York City that actually have land. So if you can maybe speak directly to efforts from like the East Harlem, El Barrio CLT or Cooper Square CLT, the CLTs that actually have been successful in acquiring land, I think that would be helpful too.
Cool. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about it. I didn't like prepare anything major, but I'm happy to share sort of some ideas or examples. So I would say effective community engagement around CLTs, especially from like there's sort of like two paths that I think have been really effective in the very early stages of forming a CLT. One is sort of like having be like a vacant lot or an empty space or a potential site that is identified where the community can kind of come around and do visioning sessions about what they would like to see there. I guess that could technically also be broader of like what, right? Like the idea of a CLT is like the community is leading the development process in a way that is going to benefit those who currently live here. And so, you know, whether it's for a specific site or just the neighborhood in general, like doing some visioning, and that could be like around what is it that we want for our community? What would we like to see here? What kind of development do we see existing, and what kind of development would we like? And you know, that's a way for people to come together and start really like reflecting on what is the current state of the neighborhood and what do people want to see different. But I think so that could be like general, but I think that we've seen a lot of really successful community engagement when it's around a specific site. So for example, I saw on your list in the notes, like Western Queens Community Land Trust has this mostly vacant, very underutilized, enormous Department of Education building where it's they were going to give it away to Amazon, right? Like the city and the state were just going to give this building away. The community fought back and said no. And now the Community Land Trust is saying we don't want to wait for this building to just be given away again to a group that's not going to benefit our neighborhood. We're going to proactively envision what we'd like to see here. And so they've done, you know, a lot of engagement with local groups, with artists, with young people, with street vendors around like, what is it that we actually need and want for our neighborhood? Similarly, in East New York, we've seen, you know, parking lots that are being used by the police, but are actually owned by HPD, like controlled by HPD, and designated for affordable housing. So East New York Community Land Trust have used like a specific parking lot site to come together and say like, hey, we don't want the cops to use this site for their private cars. They're not even using police cars. They're just driving in and parking their private cars. And so that's been and saying like, instead we need like housing. It's like, you know, and envisioning like, what is the type of housing we want? You know, like maybe we want green space with the housing, but yeah. And so I think doing that really publicly, right? So doing big town halls, we've seen groups do like surveys of local residents. We've seen a lot of art projects. So I think a lot of this visioning is really ripe for art projects of like, you know, maybe there's a lot with like a fence. And so hanging up on the fence, like your vision. So like, oh, we want community garden. Let's put that up here. Like, you know, a big sign that then you're like leaving on the lot. So it's like really public. So those have all been, I think, really successful. Western Queens CLT is doing regular potlucks right now outside of the Department of Education building. So like building community at that site. So yeah, again, like while this could be a broader neighborhood sort of like vision, I think remembering that community land trusts are really like about places. And so keeping it really rooted in like a specific location and having people really be coming together about a specific location, I think is helpful. The other like successful community engagement that I've seen around community land trusts have been through tenant organizing and like through building organizing, where tenants are formed a tenant association and have come together to say, hey, like maybe our landlord's selling the building, or hey, this landlord's not taking care of the building, and we demand that this building be sold to us or be sold to a nonprofit that's going to be like working with us to make sure the building is run in the way that we want. So bringing more tenant control. And so we've seen more and more community land trusts do sort of like build their base of people and support and engage the community around specific buildings. So all coming together to say, hey, these tenants are fighting for control of their building. Let's all come together and support that and work to get this building onto the community land trust. So yeah, I think those, especially like, you know, of course, there's more community engagement as the campaigns kind of move forward. And, but I think, yeah, yeah, I'm just like pausing to think, what are other good examples? Yeah, I mean, I think, is that helpful, or are there?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It is, okay. Cool.
I had a question. Do you mind follow-up questions? Can you hear me, Elise?
Yeah, did you say that follow-up questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
sounds good.
So you mentioned it's helpful to have like a specific site or location in mind. Do you have recommendations as to whether it should be public land that we identify, or vacant lots, or what seems to be
Yeah,
helpful in that area?
I will say, you know, I don't really want to give like this one is better than this one. I will say, like, many community land trusts across the city have focused on city-owned property with the idea that maybe that property would be easier to acquire if you run a successful campaign or work with the city. You know, that's how East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust acquired 4 buildings where they were city-owned. Or a long time ago, Cooper Square Community Land Trust acquired its buildings via the city. And of course, like, private buildings or private property would be like more expensive. That being said, you know, I think it depends like what is in your neighborhood and what type of like kind of property you all have identified, or that the larger community has identified as priority. So if you know, choose a vacant lot and want to create a community garden, you know, that maybe is more feasible, like a city-owned lot, take it over, do a garden. If you want to do like a full construction project and like build new housing, that just like to keep in mind, of course, that would be a lot of money, which is totally fine. But like maybe going the route of like working with tenants to acquire a building would actually also like be a, like, maybe it's not that different in cost. But yeah, I think like I think that there's like a lot of pros and cons to each type of property. Yeah, so I think I would like throw it back and here, you know, what is the city-owned property in the neighborhood? Is it centrally located? Is there what's on it right now, etc. So yeah, it's kind of a non-answer, but that was my thought.
Thank you so much, Elise. I had 2 really quick questions. Do you know of any government resources that are available for groups?
Yeah, so the answer is there's not. Well, can I clarify, when you say government resources for this, could you clarify a little bit what you mean by this?
I'm not an expert in this, so if you know of any funding or any resources that are available,
Yeah. So,
educational resources, you know, it doesn't have to be specifically for funding, but if there are funding opportunities.
for funding, yeah. So, there are, and maybe in the future will continue. I mean, we hope we're like trying to build out more funding opportunities for community land trusts. So, you know, one thing that is maybe a little less available to you all in this moment, but maybe in the future, is there is a community land trust initiative through city council discretionary funding. So we have, for the past 3 years, gotten $1.5 million from city council that is distributed to about 18 CLTs and technical assistance providers to do this work. So, you know, that's something that, like, as groups develop and then as our funding increases, we're able to bring in more groups. There are also like private funding opportunities that, like, at this exact moment are maybe not like being offered, but there's a group called Change, or like a fund called Change Capital Fund. And they're currently funding, I think maybe like 7 or 8 community land trusts in New York City. And I think they're funding them for about 3 or 4 years at like over $100,000 each year. I forget the exact numbers, but that's been like a really great support. I'll also add, there's a group, I'll share this with you. Enterprise is putting together a training program for community land trusts in New York State. And I'll put it in the chat. I think it's for like existing community land trusts, but again, like maybe they'll do it again in the future, or like if you all want to try to apply, then, you know, maybe they would accept you as like a group exploring CLTs. And then I'll also just say there's a person at HPD named Stephen Erdman, and I will put his email in the chat. And he's the community land, I actually forget his exact title, but he's something like the community land trust engagement person, or like director of shared equity, I forget exactly. But he's been somebody who's been coordinating, like been liaising between HPD and community land trusts. And they have been doing, I think it's like a 4-hour training for community land trusts to give like a lot of information and resources and answer questions. And so I would recommend maybe reaching out to Stephen Erdman to see if you all could, you know, get that training or like see what resources he might recommend.
Awesome, thank you.
And then the last thing I'll say is, like, through Nicely, you know, if you all kind of like form an entity and apply for membership to Nicely, we like do collective fundraising and, you know, find ways to support our members in like having resources to do organizing. And sorry, last thing I'll share about resources is New Economy Project has a loan fund, and I don't know if this exactly applies, but if like having a loan for some of this work, like, I don't know, to like the goal of the loan fund is to like support solidarity economy work. And so it's another possible resource.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give the floor to Jesus. I see he's had his hand raised for a little bit.
Yeah, hello, Anjanette, and then hello, everyone. So I think that there's two things about. Does everyone? Am I heard well? Am I being heard loud and clear? Yeah. All right. So I think that there's two sort of like categories of community engagement that I'm sort of like thinking while I'm listening to Elise, right? And that I think that one is community engagement, you know, where we're sort of like encouraging people to proactively, right, be looking at certain properties and then be thinking of ways to collectively start to advocate for CLTs, right? But then the other, I think, concern that I have in community engagement is just the general, you know, motivating people to just be part of a CLT conversation, of getting to know what a CLT is, and then what is it that the housing committee is proposing. So is the housing committee looking of identifying you know, available vacant lots, or and then proactively be advocating for the development of CLTs? Or is it sort of like proposing just to create these sessions just so that people would be informed, and then you know, any action thereafter is just dependent on who might be interested of you know, creating or advocating for a CLT? So what is the finality like?
Question, I think it would be the latter. The community board can start a CLT. The point of these meetings is really to use the community board as the educational tool for anyone in the community that's interested in learning more about what this is. And if they are interested in moving forward with this, then they can attend these series of workshops. And, you know, we're hoping to make them as engaging and as worthwhile as we can, you know, using the poll from the community board so that people could not only learn what they are very broadly, but if they wanted to move forward, they would be able to have at least some very introductory tools that will help them. I mean, all of the information from Elise on this call is astounding, and, you know, really appreciate you, you know, taking the time to be here and to share that with us, because otherwise, I know for myself, I wouldn't have had any other way of knowing that these resources even existed. And thank you so much for the recommendation on how to engage the community with the site idea. I think we talked about that in another meeting where it would be hypothetical. So, you know, I think that's really great. You know, we could brainstorm a little bit more about how we want the meeting to look like, and I'll leave that to Elise to test that out. But I think that that's a lot, you know, sorry. It's very helpful, the information that was provided.
Well, my question is more to the community board itself. Is there a conflict of interest if either a member of the community board or someone like myself who is a member of the board opposite to someone like me who is just a committee member, then also be part of an independent group in the community to work hands-on on organizing a field? Is there, what is the, what are the
Everybody on
powers
this
of-
board has other affiliations. As long as you're not using the board for profit for yourself, that's no conflict of interest.
No, I'm asking because it could be, I don't know, not that it should be, but that it could be.
If there's anything that anybody thinks is questionable, and it doesn't sound like that's questionable, because folks have various affiliations throughout the community, and very often that's how they got here. There's also a conflict of interest board that we could ask them if, is this a conflict of interest?
Actually, I have nothing to do with this.
So
Yeah,
before you go to
come back and then.
I wanted to bring it back to Elise. Elise, did you?
Elise, thank you so much for all your guidance and advice. I had a couple of other questions. So in terms of the visioning workshops, do you have thoughts on how folks have been able to successfully engage with like local businesses? It seems like some CLTs have worked with in that area.
Yeah. I think that I'm trying to think if there are groups that I know who've like actively been engaging their local businesses. I mean, I will say, just going back to Western Queens CLT, the building, the large Department of Education building that they're working to like get control of, they want to turn it into space for businesses. And so they've identified a bunch of like prospective businesses that would like to have space there, and have like basically engaged these businesses to similarly like envision, you know, what is it that we need in order to be successful. And they, I'll just add, like, have had a real focus on like cooperatively run businesses, like businesses that, like the Community Land Trust, focuses on community ownership of land, like businesses that have a focus on like collective ownership and like community advancement as a whole, not just like, you know, one person getting super rich. So yeah, I mean, I think, so for those of you who don't know, because I came here before, but like my background is community organizing. And so, I mean, I think just like speaking from that perspective, I would say just like a similar process of like in bringing together maybe like small businesses in the neighborhood that you think would benefit from having their business be put on a CLT, or like you see how a CLT in the neighborhood could support them in some way, and bringing them together and having a meeting and talking with them about it. Similarly, I think like in this type of work, like the visioning session is not just to like decide, you know, what is it that we're going to do, but it's also to like build community and like help make sure that the work is really like benefiting those who are like directly impacted. And so yeah, and so I think Western Queens CLT did do this. I know that Brooklyn Level Up is in Brooklyn, in like central Brooklyn and East Flatbush have also done this a bit. Like, I think it's about like building relationships, right? So like, it might just be identifying like a corridor in the neighborhood that you're like, okay, this block of businesses, we've seen a lot of turnover, but we know that like they're like a certain number of small businesses that have been here for a long time. Let's try to bring them together and talk with them about what they need in order to like remain in the neighborhood. And we know that there's a tool, a CLT, that could be helpful in supporting that. And so I would say like, yeah, I mean, to me, like a meeting is always the best because it's like building relationships with each other and like having that conversation together. But then if that doesn't feel possible, I think like it would be really cool to see the community board issue like a survey to, you know, small businesses in the neighborhood around like issues that they're facing, and with the like eye towards how might the tool of a CLT be able to like support them.
Thanks so much. Does anyone
I
else
mean, the
have
other
any-
thing I'll add, sorry, just like from, again, like an organizer perspective, right? Like when there's a crisis, people come together, and that's like a moment of like building community and then like taking it to the next level where you could be like, there's a crisis, okay, let's like use a CLT to like support, you know, our vision for the neighborhood. So like maybe there's one particular small business that's like beloved in the neighborhood that is at risk of leaving, or is that in, you know, some sort of like their rent is about to be raised, like doubled, and like finding a way for like, again, like the community to come together and then use that as an opportunity to like talk about community land trusts. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? I met a couple people actually within our community who both work for HPD, and I was asking about community land trust, and like they have any research that would be helpful, and they mentioned two places. One was Interborough Community Land Trust, and then an organization called U. So I'm curious if you know either of those, if you think they'd be useful organizations to be in touch with, especially in terms of if we're wanting to learn more.
Yeah, I didn't, was the second organization UHAB?
You have, yeah.
Cool. I used to work at UHAB, so I've heard of them. So Interborough is a citywide community land trust. I mean, this is another option, is like maybe there's a lot or a building and you all feel like you don't have capacity to build your own community land trust, but you want to work with Interborough to put this piece of land into their community land trust and like, you know, make sure that there's someone from Sunset Park or a few people on the board to like have a bit, you know, ownership over what is happening in the land trust. But yeah, Interborough is great. They currently have 2 single-family homes on their CLT, but they're slated to get a lot more. I think probably over the next year, I think there's going to be like over 100 units put on the CLT. So they're about to be in like a really rapid growth phase. And I think that they are mostly going to be limited equity cooperatives on the co-op, on the CLT. So yeah, I could definitely like put you in touch with them. Or as I said, like maybe you want to just invite them to like expand into Sunset Park rather than like create your own thing. You have, Interborough is made up of 4 organizations. Like 4 organizations came together to form Interborough. One of them is, I mean, I can list Manny Mutual Housing Housing Association of New York, Habitat for Humanity, the Center for New York City Neighbors, or Center for New York City Neighborhoods, and UHAB, the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. So those 4 organizations came together to form Interborough. So obviously one of them is UHAB, and they are an organization that has been around since about the 70s, and we're really involved in like the homesteading, like, you know, tenant, like people coming, taking over abandoned buildings, using sweat equity and converting it into co-ops in the 70s. They're really like the limited equity experts in the city, and are very involved in both like providing technical assistance to existing co-ops, as well as like on a smaller scale working to like support tenants in forming new co-ops. So yeah, definitely think they are a great resource. Yeah. I think especially if you all are interested in, if you have identified like what we want in our neighborhood is more kind of like limited equity cooperatives, then I think that they make a lot of sense to reach out to.
Hi, Elise. I didn't introduce myself before. This is Maria Rosa. I too used to work at UHAC.
Oh,
I was the director of the housing fund program back in the 80s, late 70s. So we should go for drinks and exchange gossip at some point. However, and anyone else is invited. Of the but now it's on the record. So I was wondering if you first thing is that my understanding was that you have, and I have not heard you have any connection to Interworld having a presence in some department, advising or lending IT uh, assistance to anyone here, but you have. I attended one meeting at the new school a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, where there were people from Sunset Park already interested in creating a CLT in Sunset Park. I haven't heard anything lately. I don't know if they dissolved, if they still added. Certainly, the place to go to is you have and ask them. But do you know anything about this?
I'm so sorry. I wasn't able to hear everything.
I think that, just to quickly summarize, I think the question was if you had any knowledge of you have looking to expand into,
Or they had already had a
Sorry, if I have any knowledge, if you have what? Sorry.
that UHAP is already lending assistance to a self-formed group of people in Sunset Park wanting to form a CLT.
Good question. I do not know. Sorry, it took so long to get to here. I don't know the answer.
Okay, no problem. But the other thing is, that do you know of any, and it doesn't have to be within New York City or even New York State, this idea of when people die in the state and the property then goes through an attempt to probate that property to look for heirs and whatnot, and if that search doesn't yield anything, then the property gets sold at auction by each county. But I've always had where people make a lot of profit. It becomes very, very profitable. And I've always thought that was kind of wrong, to put it nicely. That if someone unfortunately owned it, died intestate, no heirs can be identified, that the segue to that is that land get sort of go to a good purpose of providing minimalist affordable housing to people who definitely are in need. And I'm big on minimalist affordable housing. No $2,000 refrigerators, no balconies, no, because people need a roof over their heads, and that's not what's happening in New York City, unfortunately. Oh, so do you know anything about that in another state, in other counties, upstate New York, where somebody is already has made headway in making that happen?
You know, I don't know about that. I think what I have heard of is like programs in other states where like they're encouraging people that like when they're, you know, in their will to leave their home to a community land trust or that type of thing. One thing that we're working on here in New York City is around the tax lien sale. So, you know, trying to prevent people from losing their homes through like, yeah, like fees and then foreclosure. So using CLTs partially as a tool to like keep people in their homes or keep equity in neighborhoods. But in terms of what you're describing, I haven't heard exactly that. But definitely sounds interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I wanted to touch base with Elise. So from what I'm hearing, just to, you know, and let me know if we're headed in the right direction or if anyone has any other thoughts. But from what I'm understanding is our first kickoff meeting, we'll give a brief introduction. What is a community land trust? We can say what are some examples, a community garden, housing, tenants can acquire the building, space can be used for small businesses. And then we would hold a visioning session where we would break folks up into groups and then they would be able to tell us what they would like to see in Sunset Park. So the way I was quickly thinking is we can have a map of, we can, drill this down a bit, but we can have either a map of Sunset Park or we can have actual visuals that look at specific lots on Fifth Avenue and then have people really talk and determine, okay, what can we see in this space? And we could really cast a broad net and invite everyone. We can try to get students from high school involved, small businesses. I think we can really try to get as many people out and just so that they're engaging in conversation. And let them tell us, what lot, let them pick the lot and then let them sort of vision out what they would like to see there. And then we can follow up with meetings about the legal challenges and financing from there. Does that sound like?
Do you hear me? Yeah, I think that sounds great. I think that having one CLT had like large piece of paper in public spaces and markers and people were like writing down their ideas. So yeah, that sounds good to me. John, do you?
I support that goal, that vision. But here are my concerns. One is that the community board has not taken any sort of a vote on CLTs and whether or not people on the board even support investigating CLTs. And so I think if we're going to have a meeting where people are, a meeting that is very clearly pro CLT, I mean, I support it, but I think there has to be space for people who don't support it. Now, maybe those people would just not come to the meeting, but I think for the sake of democracy, I don't know if everybody supports it. I mean, I can see people making the argument that home ownership is good, for example. Private land ownership is good. It's a way of building generational wealth. I mean, these are things you hear a lot. See people in the community saying, if you're talking about taking land and turning it over to nonprofit use in perpetuity, no, I don't support that because I think people in Sunset Park should own their homes, for example. I just think that some space should be for that. The second thing, sorry, I'll be quick. Identifying individual spaces, I also think needs to be a collective enterprise and something that, as Elise Golden said, is very communal and very transparent so that there's no suggestion that a couple of people are trying to like leverage something to get specific projects built on specific properties because that would undermine the legitimacy. So if we want to do a mapping thing, I don't know how that could work. I mean, it could work. I'm just concerned how it would work democratically and inclusively at an introductory meeting rather than having some sort of democratic mapping activity that went first to identify sites. And I, for example, Damien, and Elise, and others, and Maria have been working on a list of sites, but there had been no conclusion about what exactly we were going to do with that list, how we were going to roll it out, etc. So I'm not saying no to these ideas, but these are my concerns.
Okay, so just want to be cognizant of time. Right now, we're at 7:30. I think John brought up really great points. I think we can leave space for debating CLTs and home ownership. We're also what we had discussed was having 4 meetings. The first would be the introductory community engagement CLT meeting. The second would be on financing. The third would be on the legal challenges surrounding CLTs. And then we were going to end it with a town hall where we were going to invite elected officials. And we can definitely, we have to hash out exactly what the agenda is going to be for each of these meetings, but maybe at that town hall could be a space to even debate this. So just wanted to mention that. I mean, we can switch up, so I have, just for full transparency, I have a hard stop at 45. But if anyone who is a board member and a committee member, if you can stick around, if the conversation keeps going, if someone could just do me the favor to kick it off, I would really appreciate it. So the meeting doesn't have to end at 7:45. I have a personal instance of there after, I apologize. But yeah, I mean, this is really everyone's meeting. If we want to do something, different in terms of it, mapping it out, nothing is set in stone. Whatever we think will flow better.
I guess I have a question to your point, John. Like, do you think, or maybe Gary, I'm not sure, like, do we need to kind of propose this whole agenda process to the entire board before we execute on the strategies?
I think each committee can do whatever it wishes to do, whatever it wants to do. So yeah, I'm just saying, I think as whatever we choose to do, I mean, we're taking a position on something. I think we just have to be clear about, we're talking about this, we're not talking about that. I mean, I just think we need to make space for people to be able to question and challenge, and also, especially if it's coming to something specific, like, well, what about this building? What about this lot? There are plenty of spaces in the neighborhood where we can explore this, but, what if somebody objects? What if somebody from that block wants to show up and say, oh, not that lot, that's a terrible idea? How do you have that conversation?
And I think that's fine, but I think we also need to take a step back and realize that we are also learning just like everyone else. No one here is, I can speak for myself, but I'm certainly not an expert in this. So I think the expectation for these meetings, again, are very introductory. And we're just, giving the information to people and saying, there's this empty parking lot. Maybe it could be a community garden, and show examples of community gardens in the Lower East Side or in Williamsburg, and how you can just re-envision space. Nothing from these meetings are going to be, set in stone, because the community board cannot move forward with establishing a community land trust. These are just informational and educational.
So it would be examples. It would, like, you could give examples. Here's a space, but it's like, we're not committing to anything, we're not advocating specifically. This is an example. And then,
yeah, I'm going to take it off to Jeremy, but again, the community board cannot cannot start a community land trust. These meetings are strictly educational and informative.
So I think you have it exactly right. You could have educational meetings as you wish, to give people in the community who might want to organize one, the tools that they could use. I don't think it is for the board to say, well, this property and this property and this property should be. However, there are individual board members, as is already being done, or committee members who are already looking at property. So while it might not be the board saying, well, we should look at this property or that, There's nothing to stop an individual in that meeting from saying, let's look at this property.
These meetings have been advertised, promoted via the board. Friends of Sunset Park takes those announcements and further shares them with the community on social media so that it's not being done in secret. And I haven't seen or heard of anyone show up, or whether it's virtually or in person, and say, well, wait a minute, I don't like this because of this, this, and this, and this, and this shouldn't be because of that, and have that debate. So that's one thing. The other thing that has, that what I want to say that does not refer to that is, well, I have heard concerns, and I have that concern, that if there was a public asset that is being considered and for inclusion in a land trust, and there are mechanisms, legal mechanisms for this, that whatever land, it's not remain, and let's say let's say it's a co-op or whatever, because you can have a co-op or a condo co-op situation in a CLT. Hello? Okay. In some circumstances, it's a little complicated, but that should a project not be financially viable, not keep to the rules of the spirit of CLT, or the legal thing is the mission of the CLT, that then it reverses immediately to a public asset. Like goes back, let's say, I mean, it could be years, it could be 100 years, but at any time that just because a public asset became part of a non-profit CLT, that non-profit CLT, which is private, non-profits are private entities, then hangs on to that property. Because to me, that's just not, I don't go for that, and everybody knows the stance on that.
Great point, Maria. And I think we can talk about incorporating that as a challenge, like maybe for the legal challenges workshop, but definitely want to make sure that point is addressed because that's really important. So.
Hi, everyone. My name is David. Oh, sorry if I felt like I didn't get it. But I guess I have a few comments and I guess a couple questions. I could start with the question. Comment. I guess my question would be, since Elise introduced us to that organization that represents community land trust all over New York City, I believe, would it be possible for the board to send a letter for them to come to Sunset Park, or would that be out of our hands?
So for not-for-profit to come to the community?
Like to borough, or like anyone to like come to the community and like check it out in a way.
That's not an endorsement. I think anybody could do that. If you want the board to write a letter for that, then you'll want the board to vote on that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But if you as an individual want to say, hey, why don't you come check out Sunset Park? There's nothing that prevents that.
So, no. So at the beginning of the meeting, we had quorum. So we had a couple of agenda items that we weren't allowed to vote on because we didn't have quorum within the committee. But we did, so we're voting on it. So it passes through the committee. Now it's going to go up to the full board in September to see if the full board will support it. But regardless, it went through the committee as a proposal that we supported. So we would still be able to send, just for clarification, the letter to the mayor would need to go for a full board vote before it's sent back.
Correct.
So
it would go, yeah. I know that it has to go through the full board. I'm just, I guess, asking if that would be endorsing them, or like us having our own input. Because I know you said that the board is not meant to create CLTs, but I guess my question would be like if the board could invite people, nonprofits or et cetera, to come to Sunset Park, but we don't tell them what lots or kind of give them.
So that is kind of endorsing a CLT, so that would be, that I think would require a vote of the board. If you're saying, hey, just check out the community, that's something different. Consider working in the community, that's something different. But if you're endorsing that particular aspect of it, I think that would require a board vote.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that the board could vote, if that's a possibility. I don't want that to.
So the full board, so just to quickly answer your question, when anyone that's on the committee can come up with a proposal that we will vote on, and it could be anything. If we vote on it and we agree on it and it passes the committee, that doesn't mean that you have full board support. It will have to wait for the next board meeting that's held monthly, and it would need to go, and it would need to be vetted if the community, and that would be a position that the community board is taking. But if people are interested in reaching out as a private person, people can go in that route. But in terms of reaching out to other organizations or what have you on behalf of the board, you would have to make sure that it's going through a vote.
And Antoinette, there's a hand up on Zoom.
But you can go and invite someone on behalf of the committee without it being on behalf of the board, but the committee is the committee of the
You
board.
can invite them to make a presentation to the committee.
Yeah, because my concern would be that inviting an organization to come here and look at Sunset Park is like, come and do what you want in Sunset Park. We already have an idea, I think, maybe we haven't fine-tuned it. What is it we want and what it is we don't want? And that is up for further debate, obviously. Okay?
Into room to go meeting, presentation, we can do that, but we can't go to room, let's check out the.
And we can go with the community too. And we're here, come get us, come take us and do it, whatever. No, because people will hear that if you're not careful. Land is land.
Thank you, Maria, and Jesus, I see your hand over.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that the point that John had made, it's something that essentially reflects the concern that I had from the first question that I asked, and so then the only thing that I ask is that moving forward, when it comes to inviting people to be part of the larger conversation of CLT creations, that this language is that the proper language is being used in order to ensure that people understand what is it that they're going to be participating in regarding the activities or the workshop that this housing committee is proposing of doing. And so then that essentially is going to be important, because then I can definitely see how some people might have misinterpret this housing committee's intention, and then could potentially be wanting to reach out to the housing committee itself for further information and technical assistance and stuff like that. So how much of that is the community, the housing community looking of doing, it's also, it needs to be clear. And then, I just want to thank, everyone's input regarding the matter. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think that's really important, and I have on here that we're gonna add a disclaimer as many times during the meeting as possible. We're not here to start a CLT, it's just informational, educational. You take the information and run with it however, you see fit. Elise, thank you for your recommendation of, instead of trying to map out Sunset Park so that it seems like we're advertising certain properties, we can even have a fake lot. And do it that way. I think that would be a safe way to move forward. So thank you, Elise. This meeting was really, really helpful. Did you have anything else you wanted to bring? Okay.
So I know because you had to leave in a couple minutes. So what are we doing with tonight's information? And then what about our next meeting? How that, what's going to happen on our next meeting?
So I think yeah, I think if anyone else has any ideas about the format, I think, if you have any questions, we could just clean it up a little bit, but I think we have the agenda for the first meeting. We could finalize that and send it out to everyone. And then we'll schedule another meeting in about 2 weeks where we'll dive into the legal challenges and the funding and financing of CLTs. And hopefully by then we can hear back from, the Western Community Land Trust. If Western Queens, oh, I see.
I reached out to
No, okay, so then we can see if they would be able to join the brainstorming. Well,
Just quickly, are there other, counties that are not part of New York City, New York State, that have to of COTs that we could hear from, to expand our knowledge of options, or maybe even go as far as change the way things are right now in New York City as out and not allowed, that maybe there are other options out there to explore, and possibilities.
anyone knows of any, they're all,
I'm asking if anyone, is Elise still on the line?
Yes, I am. And yeah, there are like amazing community land trusts around the country and even around the world that are doing, oh, seems like everyone left. Is that right?
It seems like it, Elise. Yeah.
Oh, we got disconnected. There we go.
There we go. I want to take the time to say hello to Elise, and happy to see you once again on this follow-up session.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here again. It's exciting that you all are continuing to talk about community land trusts.
Yeah, and the other, I guess a question that I have personally would be, right now, like I'm part of this initiative, but then the other would be then, in regards to sort of like having the intent personally to, begin the creation of a CLT or take a more proactive engagement approach.
Mhm.
Is it okay to reach out to you and then it
Oh
wouldn't
yeah,
conflict
please
with the
do,
fact?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
hey, everyone, sorry, we were having connection issues here. So thank you again, Elise. This meeting has been really, really helpful. You helped bring a lot of effective engagement strategies. Really, really appreciate you. Cynthia, I see that your hand is raised, and I apologize because we lost connection here before. I don't know if you're still on the line or you still have a question.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
Yeah, just tell me
Okay.
yourself.
Yeah, no. First of all, I want to thank Elise and also Jesus for their comments. I thought were very helpful. I put in the chat that it is very, very difficult to hear what is being said, and when it's not recording clearly, then even the CC captions are not capturing what's being said. So I wanted to say that, but also I wanted to report in because at the last meeting, Jesus and I were part of the logistics committee, and we had talked about some things that we would need going forward when we're holding the meetings, the workshop, the town hall, whatever it's going to be. That I have reached out to some of the sources that Jesus gave me, And one of them was to Caracol, who does language translations in Spanish. Now, I wasn't able to get them, but when I went on their website, they had a place where you could submit a project. So I went ahead and did a project descriptions with the goals that we have, hoping to get their assistance with the translations, and I submitted that on behalf of the Housing Committee. And also I reached out to Beyond Care Cooperative for the childcare part of it. And I left them, information, my name, my phone number, my email, and I'm still waiting for them to get back to me. So I just wanted to report back on some of the things that I worked on.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Okay, and that's it. That's all I have to say.
Separate
I hope we
meeting to
can
talk
get this
about
audio
hashing out
thing
the agenda for
fixed.
the town hall. Cynthia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
What I was saying is that we're gonna have a separate meeting dedicated to the town hall, hashing out the agenda and thinking through the logistics a little bit more. If the cooperative and if the translation service, if you can get cost estimates, we would just need to get that approved from the community board. I'll follow up with you, Cynthia. Sorry for the audio issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, so thank you all. I'm gonna thank you, and I apologize for the audio issue. Something that we're gonna have to figure out. Thank you.